Angelicus Huang.
Welcome to episode 77 of Spurbs Herbs. Today we're going to be talking about Huang, Huang, Rhei Radix et Rhizoma, or rhubarb root, or rhizome. I, as always, are your presenter, Dr. Greg, am your presenter, Dr. Greg Sperber. So let's get into it. Today, we will be exploring an important and interesting Chinese herb. And this herb is a relatively commonly used herb in the Chinese medical subcategory of purgatives under the category of downward draining herbs and can be used in a wide variety of conditions. And as usual, we will be exploring something a little different, though today, because there's so much commentary on this herb, it's an important Chinese herb, and it can't be a dangerous one. We're doing something even more different, not discussing something a little different. So we don't have anything specific, but we are going to be talking a lot about this particular herb. And what I like about this herb is I have a great little book called Chinese Herbal Legends. And it's just such a neat little book. And it has herbal legends for, I think, is it 50 or 100 herbs? Let me see. I think it's 50. No, it's 50. 50 stories for understanding Chinese herbs. And so it's, I've used it several times in the past. This is one of the herbs, one of the 50 herbs. So we get to explore that. That could be our little something different today. So we're going to be talking about that. So please stay tuned for this intriguing episode. Before we get into that, I just wanted to remind you, I have been teaching for quite a while now on a wide variety of topics. If you like this podcast and want to explore more of my courses, they are available at www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org. That's Integrative Medicine Council, COUNCIL.org, and include a ton of different topics, including my drug herb series, looking at drugs and how they interact with herbs and vice versa, several ethics and safety courses, Chinese medical research course, several treatment of condition courses such as arthritis, neck and back pain, COVID, and depression, anxiety, and a lot more. And one of my favorite courses, the Chinese Herbal First Aid Kit. I love this course. It's all about Chinese herbal products you can buy from any Chinese shop or online, and you should have around your house just for all those normal first aid-y things, bleeding and aches and pains and all that kind of stuff. Coughs, it's colds, it's great. And they're all at a reasonable cost. And you can get an additional 20% off with the code SH20 off. So SH for Spurbs Herbs, 20 off. And so 20% off, as many courses as you want using that code. So buy a bunch. And those are all available again at www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org. Okay, so with that, let's get in. Before we get into the herb proper, let's discuss its herbal legend. I love these herbal legends. So, this is from the book, as I mentioned, Chinese Herbal Legends, 50 Stories for Understanding Chinese Herbs by Zhu and Zhu. Huang, hang on here, okay, Huang, a traditional Chinese medicinal herb, was called Huang before, not Huang. Why was it later called Huang? This is its story. Long ago, there was a doctor whose surname was Huang. For generations, his family was good at gathering Huang Lian, Huang Qi, Huang Jing, Huang Qin, and Huang Gun. These are all important Chinese herbs. Also for generations, his family had cured patients with these 5 Huang, or yellow medicinal herbs. Huang means yellow. Because of this, people all called him Mr. Wu Huang, or 5 Yellows. Every March, when Mr. Wu Huang climbed up the mountain to gather medicinal herbs, he would stay in Ma Jun's home in a village at the foot of the mountain and only leave there after autumn. Ma Jun was a farmer. The other members of his family were his wife and his son. Mr. Wu Huang and Ma Jun's family all became good friends. One year, when Mr. Wu Huang returned and entered the village, he found that Ma Jun's house was gone. Ma Jun's family suffered a calamity. His house burned down last winter and his wife died in the fire. Now he and his son live in a mountain cave, the villagers told him. Mr. Wu Huang was sorry to hear this. He went to see Ma Jun and his son in the mountain cave. Seeing Mr. Wu Huang, Ma Jun wept in his arms. As you have nothing now, you'd better follow me to gather and sell medicinal herbs with your son, said Mr. Wu Huang. Ma Jun was very glad to go with Mr. Wu Huang, and they wandered here and there. After less than 6 months, Ma Jun had learned how to dig up the Wu Huang. But Mr. Wu Huang never taught him how to cure disease. Elder brother, why don't you teach me how to cure disease? Asked Ma Jun. I think you are too impatient to be a doctor, said Mr. Wu Huang, laughing. So it should be, I think you're too impatient to be a doctor. There you go. That's better. Ma Jun was a little dissatisfied by this, so he paid attention to how Mr. Wu Huang cured people's disease, and he secretly used the medicines. As time went by, Ma Jun learnt a little without Mr. Wu Huang's noticing, and he began to practice medicine. One day, when Mr. Wu Huang was out, a pregnant woman came to see the doctor. She was very weak and as thin as a lath. What's wrong with you? Asked Ma Jun. Diarrhea, replied the woman. Wang Lian should be used to stop diarrhea, but Ma Jun gave her Huang Gun instead. After taking 2 doses of it, the patient's illness became even more serious, and she died after 2 days. When her family learned that the prescription was made by Ma Jun, they took him to the county court. After a careful study of the case, the county official judged that Ma Jun had killed the patient because he was a quack. Just then, Mr. Wu Huang came and he knelt down in the court. You should pass sentence on me instead, said Mr. Wu Huang. Who are you? Why are you a criminal? Asked the official. Master, it has nothing to do with him. I did it behind his back, cried Ma Jun. The official had heard of Mr. Wu Huang before, and when he learnt of their relationship, he very admired what they were doing for the sake of their friendship. So the official tried his best to absolve Ma Jun from guilt, and at last he fined them a sum of money to give to the dead person's family and set them free. You can't be too impatient to learn how to cure disease. As you have seen, the wrong medicine can kill people, said Mr. Wu Huang. Later, when Ma Jun had dug up medicinal herbs honestly and become a more steady person, Mr. Wu Huang began to teach him medical knowledge. So that he would always remember this lesson, Mr. Wu Huang changed the name of Huang Gun to Da Huang, so that later generations could also avoid misusing this medicinal herb. Da Huang means great yellow or big yellow. Huang Gun just means yellow root. So there you go. That's the story of the legend of Da Huang. So today's herb Da Huang, rhubarb root or rhizome, and it comes from the family Polygonaceae or buckwheat family. Standard species, according to Bensky, there are 3 standard species: Rheum palmatum, also known as Zhangye Da Huang, Rheum tanguticum, Maxim X Balf. Again, those Maxim X Balf refers to the botanist. And this in Chinese is Tanguta Da Huang, and Rheum officinale Bale, and this is Yao Yang Da Huang. And as I just mentioned, the English translation of this is big yellow. Other names include Russian rhubarb, East Indian rhubarb, Chuan Jun, which we're going to explain in a minute, Huo Shen, Jiang Jun, Jinwen Da Huang, Qing Ning Pian, Sheng Jun, and in Japanese, Daio, and in Korean, Dae Wang. Again, I don't speak Japanese or Korean. I speak a little bit of Chinese. Not good, but I speak a little bit of it. Let's talk about the Polygonaceae family here. So the Polygonaceae are knotweed, smartweed, or buckwheat family. Consists of about 48 genera and 1,200 species. Poly means many, goni means knee or joint, and polygony or Polygonaceae may refer to the swollen nodes on the stems of some species. Many species are ornamental, and others have edible components, including Coccoloba uvifera, which produce seed grapes. The seeds of 2 species of Fagopirum known as buckwheat. If you haven't had buckwheat, it's delicious. Rumex acetosa, whose leaves are known as sorrel, so that's used in salads. And of course, our herb today, where the petioles are eaten. So petioles are interesting. Those are, we know what they are. We see them all the time. I don't know about you. I don't know if I knew what they were called. Petioles is the stalk that attaches the leaf blade to the stem. So, you have the stem coming out, and then there's a little stalk, and then there's the leaf. That stalk is the petiole. Most Polygonaceae are perennial herbaceous plants with swollen nodes, but trees, shrubs, and vines are also present. The leaves of Polygonaceae are simple and arranged alternately on the stems. There are more distinctive stuff, but it got very technical very fast, so I thought there was a little bit more than we needed to get into. So going back to today's herb of Da Huang, Bensky. So remember, I have 3 major textbooks for individual herbs. I look at Bensky and his team, which is the Materia Medica Chinese. I can't remember what it is, but it's one of our basic textbooks. We all use it. And so the dosage is 3 to 15 grams. They say the dosage is 3 to 15 grams. Another textbook I use is Chen and Chen book, and Brandon Wiseman's Concise Chinese Materia Medica. Eric Brand is a friend of mine. So Eric Brand and Nigel Wiseman, very, very well known in our profession. They say the dose is, both of those sources, so Chen Chen and Brandon Wiseman, both say 5 to 10 grams is the normal dosage, with Chen and Chen saying up to 15 to 20 grams can be used in severe cases. So you can use higher doses if necessary. And the categories are interesting. Bensky and Chen Chen put this herb in the purgative subcategory of the downward draining herbs category. So that's in itself amazing. This is the first time in 77 episodes that they've agreed on anything. So the actual names are exactly the same. It's the subcategory of purgative, so these purgate you. In the category, or the chapter in the book, the category of downward draining herbs. Now, Brandon Wiseman uses a totally different approach to a lot of its naming of this. It's translations of the same thing. They're all using fairly similar, if not the exact same sources, and translating them a little bit different. But Nigel Wiseman, also co-wrote with Huang a practical dictionary of Chinese medicine. So he's very technical in his language and very specific in his language. And so the Brandon Wiseman textbook takes that into account. So it sounds a little bit odd, but it's technically very accurate. So they say it is in the offensive precipitant medicinals subcategory of the draining precipitant medicinals category. So they kind of change things. And I like their use of the word medicinals rather than herbs, because a lot of our herbs are not herbs. They're minerals, and there's animal stuff. They're not herbs. They're medicinals. I think that's a more accurate approach to this. All 3 of our sources say it is bitter and cold and enters the heart, large intestine, liver, and stomach channels, while both Chen and Chen and Brandon Wiseman say it also enters the spleen channel as well. So all of them agree at least 4 channels, and Chen and Brandon Wiseman add spleen as the 5th channel. History is pretty straightforward here. Both Bensky and his team and Chen say the original source for this herb is the Shendong Ben Sao Jing, the Divine Husbandman's classic of the Materia Medica, written in the 2nd century CE, We discuss this book a lot because a lot of our herbs come from it. It is the oldest existing book on individual herbs around. So I'm not saying there weren't other books that talked about individual herbs, but they are no longer around. And certainly herbs here and there were mentioned elsewhere, but this is the first book on individual herbs that we still have today. So very important. If an herb is in this book, it means it's probably been used from the beginning of Chinese medicine, of Chinese herbology. So it's a very old, distinguished book. So let's talk about this overall category of downward draining herbs. So, and Bensky always has such great introductions to the category and subcategories. So according to Bensky, downward draining herbs are those that either stimulate or lubricate the gastrointestinal tract to facilitate the expulsion of stool. Because the actions of downward draining herbs are dissimilar, they are divided into 3 major classes, each of which is discussed in a separate section. First are the purgatives. For the most part, these are bitter and cold in nature, which we saw with our herb today, with rather strong heat-clearing properties. They are often used for constipation due to accumulation of heat. There are moist laxatives, often nuts or seeds. These substances lubricate the intestines. They are mild in nature, and are most appropriately prescribed for the debilitated, elderly, and those who are weakened from either a febrile disease or from childbirth. And then finally, the third subcategory here is harsh expellents or cathartics. These are very strong drugs that induce pronounced diarrhea. Some of them are also diuretics and are useful in the treatment of pleurisy and ascites. So ascites is a drum-like abdomen from usually from liver problems. There's a whole reason why it happens, but that's ascites. Because of their strong effects, they are only used in very severe cases, those harsh expellents. So let's talk about these purgatives specifically, because that's where our herb today belongs. Bensky and his team continues with the discussion of the purgative subcategory. Purgatives are used in patterns of interior excess, which can be divided into 2 broad categories, interior heat and interior cold. Constipation due to accumulation of heat. When a febrile disease reaches the interior level of the body, it enters the stomach and intestines and depletes the fluids, causing constipation. If accompanied by a high fever, you have the classic presentation of the yang brightness organ stage fever noted in discussion of cold damage. So discussion of cold damage is, we just mentioned the Shennong Ben Sao Jing as being the first book of individual herbs. Discussion of cold damage, along with its companion text, the 1,000 Gold Ducats, I can't remember exactly the name of it off the top of my head. Those are a couple hundred years later, and those are the first books that we have existing on formulas, on herbal formulas, so the combination of individual herbs. So in such cases, one should use downward draining herbs to clear the heat and drain the fire. And finally, the second use of purgatives that are constipation due to accumulation of cold. Accumulation of cold may also lead to constipation by interfering with the normal expulsion of stool from the body. In most cases, there are also systemic cold symptoms. In addition to purgatives, one should therefore use herbs that warm interior cold. So we know this herb is bitter and cold. Generally, you wouldn't want to add that into something that's cold, but if you're adding in with other herbs that are very warming, they can work well to deal with this constipation due to accumulation of cold. So what does good quality Da Huang look like? So according to Bensky, they say good quality consists of compact, heavy roots with oily content, a yellowish brown surface, fresh aromatic fragrance, and a bitter but not astringent taste. When chewed, it should stick to the teeth. I always love that as a description. Now we have another textbook that we use called Chinese Medicinal Identification and an Illustrated Approach, written by Zhao and Chen, and edited actually by Eric Brand, who is Brand and Wiseman of our other textbook on individual herbs. So that text says Da Huang has roughly cylindrical, conical, ovoid, or irregular pieces, externally yellowish brown to reddish brown when decorticated. The texture is firm with a delicately aromatic odor, and the taste is bitter and slightly astringent, sticky, and gritty when chewed. Medicinal material with a firm texture, a delicate aromatic odor, and a bitter and slightly astringent taste, so basically everything we just said, is superior in commercial grade. They also discuss two technical terms when viewing this herb. The first is the brocade pattern, or jinwen, which are brocade-like reticulations seen on the exterior or horizontally cut surface formed by interconnected off-white parenchyma, reddish-brown rays, and star spots. The second are star spots, or xingdian, which are small, dark, red rays of dots, which can be seen on the horizontally fractured surface. They may be scattered or arranged in rings and appear like dots of stars. This phenomena comes from abnormal vascular bundles in the pith, and the radial striations are rays of abnormal vascular bundles. So those are specific things you look for in Da Huang. These are things that are specific to Da Huang. So what are its Chinese medical actions? And it's interesting. It has, it's in the purgatives. We think purgatives, okay, it does have all those actions, but it has some really other interesting actions besides just that. So according to Bensky and his team, Da Huang drains heat and purges accumulations for high fever, profuse sweating, thirst, constipation, abdominal distension and pain, delirium, yellow tongue coating, and a full pulse. This presentation is referred to either as intestinal heat excess or the yang brightness organ stage of the 6 stages of disease. It also drains fire for fire from excess leading to intense fever, sore throat, hot, swollen, and painful eyes, or fire toxin sores due to heat excess obstructing the blood level. Particularly useful when these problems are accompanied by constipation. It clears heat, transforms dampness, and promotes urination for damp heat leading to such problems as edema, jaundice, painful urinary dribbling, as well as acute, hot, dysenteric disorders. It drains heat from the blood for blood in the stool, either from bleeding hemorrhoids or heat accumulating in the intestines. Also for chaotic movement of hot blood that overflows, manifested in vomiting blood or nosebleed accompanied by constipation. Additionally, it invigorates the blood and dispels blood stasis for amenorrhea, or lack of menstruation, fixed abdominal masses, or fixed pain due to blood stasis. Also for blood stasis due to traumatic injury or intestinal abscess. This is an important herb for treating both recent and long-term blood stasis, as it can both eliminate static blood that is outside the vessels via the bowels and clear the heat that often develops from stasis. And finally, it clears heat and reduces fire toxicity, used either topically or internally for burns or skin lesions due to heat. So that's all the functions according to Bensky and their team. Let's see what Chen say. So they say it attacks accumulations by purging downwards to treat various kinds of constipation. It purges fire. Da Huang has an excellent ability to purge excess fire, whether constipation is present or not. It also clears heat and eliminates toxins. Additionally, it activates blood circulation and removes blood stasis. Da Huang has 2 unique functions in activating blood circulation and removing blood stasis. First, it eliminates blood stasis and bruises through its purgative function. Then it clears heat related to the stasis. Finally, it clears damp heat and promotes diuresis, or promotes urination. Da Huang treats water accumulation in patients who have no deficiencies. So Brand and Wiseman say it drains and precipitates to attack accumulations, drains fire and staunches bleeding, clears heat and resolves toxin, and quickens the blood and dispels stasis. So very similar Slightly different verbiage, but very similar to what we've already been hearing. The Chinese medicinal identification and illustrated approach says Da Huang drains heat, frees the stool, cools the blood, resolves toxicity, dispels blood stasis, and unblocks menstruation. So that's the first time we specifically hear that it can be useful for menstruation. Well, we did mention amenorrhea earlier, so yeah. The Divine Farmer's Materia Medica says this inferior class herb. So we'll talk about inferior class in just a minute. So this inferior class herb mainly precipitates blood stasis, blood block, and cold and heat. So it says, remember, this is the oldest, so it's not necessarily how it's used today, but originally it was good for both cold and heat. It breaks concretions and conglomerations, accumulations and gatherings, and lodged room and abiding food. It flushes the stomach and intestines to weed out the stale and bring forth the new, disinhibits and frees the flow of water and grain, regulates the center to transform food, and quiets and harmonizes the 5 viscera. And here's those inferior class herbs. So the Divine Farmer's Materia Medica classifies herbs as superior class, middle class, or inferior class. So inferior class herbs are usually toxic and cannot be taken for long periods of time. And it did say, I didn't quote it here, but it does say, the Divine Farmer's Materia Medica does say that this is a toxic herb, which we're going to find generally is not said in the other texts, but is kind of referred to a little bit. So it's kind of there, but it kind of isn't. It is prepared in a lot of different ways. So let's talk about that in general. To enhance this herb's purgative function, it should be added at the end of the decocting process. Bensky and his team says should be added near the end of the boil or boiled for 3 minutes separately and then added to the rest of the strained decoction. Chen actually take that a little bit further, say it should be cooked for, well, actually they say it should be cooked for 5 to 10 minutes, so it can be cooked a little bit longer. Well, Brandon Wiseman just says to add it at the end or simply infused in boiling water. So don't actually cook it, just infuse it. So you pour boiling water over it. So Bensky and his team has an extensive discussion of several preparations. When not prepared in any particular way, this herb is called unprepared rhubarb or sheng da huang. Because of its ability to drive out the old and promote the new with a rapid, irresistible force, it has long been called the general or jiangjun, or in its raw form, shengjung. So remember I told you we were going to explain what those herbs actually meant. Those names actually meant. So the general, I like that. If it is produced in Sichuan province, it is called Sichuan rhubarb or Chuan da huang or Chuan jun. So let's get into types of different preparations. It can be steamed. So steamed rhubarb or shu da huang. The root is mixed with yellow rice wine and steamed, then dried in the sun. This is also known as processed rhubarb or zhi da huang, zhi jun, or shu jun. Prepared in this way, the downward draining and cooling properties are moderated, rendering it more appropriate for weaker patients who have an excess pathogen that requires purging. Some hold the view that steamed rhubarb clears damp heat, as in the following passage from Zhang Bingcheng's Convenient Reader of Materia Medica, or the Bensao Biandu, written in 1887. Once it has been prepared in wine, whether steamed or dry fried, it then specifically enters the small intestine and the bladder to treat damp heat, urinary blockage, and similar symptoms. So that's steamed rhubarb. We have wine-washed rhubarb, or jiushi da huang. The roots are sprayed with wine, then baked dry. This is also known as wine rhubarb, or jiu da huang, or wine grape general, jiu da jun. Although both this method of preparation and the one above involve wine, the process of baking does not reduce the herb's purgative effect as much as the steaming process. In terms of the strength of its downward draining action, wine-washed rhubarb is thought to be halfway between the unprepared herb and the steamed herb. The particular advantage of this form of preparation is that it can rein in upper body fire, directing it downward. Thus, it is often used for large intestine heat toxin, which follows the channel upward and causes redness of the eyes, toothache, mouth ulcers, and restless heat in the chest. vinegar rhubarb, or su da huang. The roots are sprayed with vinegar, then baked dry or dry fried and sliced. This form of preparation enables the herb's action to enter the liver and break up blood stasis and to drain heat excess from the blood level. So, when we say these preparations, there's a lot underneath the preparation. So like we say vinegar. Vinegar is very sour. The taste of the liver or of the wood element is sour. So that's why this helps the liver. Okay, next herb is charred rhubarb, or da huang tang. Slices of the raw root are dry fried over high heat until the exterior is charred black. Then it is sprayed with cold water to halt the cooking process. They are then baked dry. This process greatly reduces its ability to drain downward and break up blood stasis. At the same time, however, it empowers it to stop bleeding. Thus, in this form, it is appropriate for accumulated heat in the intestines, leading to blood in the stool. I love this next name. Slices of pure tranquility, or Qingning Pian. Love that. Slices of pure tranquility. The herb is boiled in yellow rice wine until soft, pounded into a paste, dried in the sun, then ground into flour. The flour is then mixed with yellow rice wine and honey, steamed thoroughly, kneaded evenly, formed into a long roll, and placed in an earthenware jug to rest for 10 days until evenly moist inside and out. It is then sliced. This form of the herb is sold as a prepared medicine on the herb market. It is often used by those patients who cannot tolerate a strong purgative for such symptoms as fullness of the chest and abdomen, food stagnation, constipation, and dark urine. That is all our preparations at this point. Let's talk about Western uses of this. The PDR for herbal medicines, PDR stands for Physician's Desk Reference, so it tends to be a little bit medicalized. So they discuss this herb as approved for Commission E for constipation. So if you're not familiar with Commission E, this was something in the 90s, I believe, that was commissioned by the European Union to look at herbs. And basically, it looked at all the science at that time and either approved or disapproved herbs for marketing in the European Union. So being approved by Commission E means that it was well researched at that time. It's probably getting a little bit old in its research at this point, and was found to have some benefits. So approved by Commission E for constipation. Unproven uses include its use as an appetite stimulant and for treatment of digestive disorders. Gastrointestinal catarrh. Catarrh is basically a buildup of mucus anywhere in the body. So we often, think of it in the airway, so respiratory catarrh, though it can be any cavity of the body. So in this case, the gastrointestinal tract. And can also be unproven use for painful teething in children. Can be used externally for burns and other skin conditions. So those are the Western uses. So let's get into its commentary. Again, Bensky has a great commentary on this herb, so let's get into it. They say bitter cold and with a strong downward directing action, Da Huang strongly mobilizes and reaches directly into the lower burner. Entering the yang brightness, it washes away accumulated obstruction due to heat from excess. Entering the terminal yin, it clears heat from excess in the blood level and eliminates blood stasis. In this way, it is useful for a wide variety of conditions, including constipation due to clumped heat in the intestines, diarrhea due to collected blockage in the intestines, jaundice, epistaxis, which is nose bleeding, red eyes, and swollen throat due to ascendant fire and heat compelling the blood upward, and heat toxin sores and abscesses. It is also used for amenorrhea due to stasis and stagnation, postpartum obstruction, and injury and hematoma or bruising from trauma. Unprepared Da Huang can also be ground into a powder and used externally to cool heat and remove toxins. The Materia Medica for decoctions of Tangye Ben Sao, written in 1306, notes, Da Huang is a yin within yin herb, which drains fullness, pushes out the old to create the new, and expels old filth in order to quiet the 5 yin organs, exactly like suppressing turmoil and rebellion to bring about great peace, which is why it is called the general, or Jiangjun. Shangshan Lei elaborates on the actions of this herb. The 12 characters from the Divine Husbandman's Classic of Materia Medica that say, pushes out the old to create the new, regulates the middle to transform food, and quiets the 5 yin organs, relate to the application of Da Huang and should be taken most seriously. This is because unblocking is equivalent to tonification, both in the digestion of the intestines and stomach and in the total circulation of the blood vessels. If there is dormant foulness lodged in stagnation, turbid filth will not be expelled, and then even the newly generated blood will readily accumulate into stasis. Only washing away this old putrefaction will create freshness, so that the middle qi will be harmoniously regulated, food will not be hindered in its transformation, and the 5 yin organs will rest in peaceful harmony. Shang goes on to lament that some Materia Medica texts characterize its strong effects as toxic, thereby scarring the average practitioner from using it in the clinic. Sorry, not scarring, scaring the average practitioner from using it in the clinic. When even doctors in Western countries extol it as a marvelous tonic for the stomach! Exclamation point. Nonetheless, Da Huang is a strong purgative and must be used with care during, for example, menstruation or for deficient patients. Inform the patient that it tends to turn the urine and sweat yellow. It also passes through to the breast milk, which may turn yellow and can cause diarrhea in an infant. Note also that the herb has a peculiar double action. While a large dose, 10 grams or more, will promote bowel movement, as expected, a small dose may have the opposite effect. If a strong effect is needed, the herb should be added separately later in the process of cooking a decoction because overcooking will reduce its effect. What is less known is that this herb can be used with excellent effect to expel phlegm heat through the intestines. Commentary on the Divine Husbandman's Classic of Materia Medica, the Shenan Bensao Jingshu, written in 1625, explains that it is very cold and very bitter with a direct nature, best at opening the lower body, and is therefore an important herb in the treatment of heat clumped in the middle and lower burners as a result of cold damage, warm pathogen diseases, hot disorders, and damp heat, leading to constipation and urinary difficulty. It is also good for dampness and heat congealing into phlegm in the middle and lower burners. It expels pathogens to halt their violence and has a special ability to uproot chaos and restore normality. So that is our commentary on it. And you can see this is a strong herb that does a lot of really important things, but some caution needs to be employed. So let's compare this with a couple other herbs. Sobensky compares this herb with 2 others. The first one is Crotonus fructus, or Bado. Bado is actually in that subcategory that we talked about, mentioned earlier, which is harsh expellents. So this is an even harsher herb. So here we go. Both herbs are purgatives, but while Crotonus fructus Bado is hot and used when cold accumulates internally within the yin organs, Da Huang is cold and used for heat buildup in the yang organs. Both herbs, if prepared and used in small doses, will drive out the old to bring in the new, reduce accumulation, and harmonize the middle. Crotonus fructus Bado, however, is very toxic. Externally, it is irritating to both the skin and mucous membranes. Internally, it causes diarrhea and loss of fluids. By contrast, Da Huang has a very low toxicity. It breaks up blood stasis, clears damp heat, and resolves toxicity. Encountering the sources of the classic Materia Medica, the Wenre Zhengyuan, written in the late Qing dynasty, which lasted from 1644 to 1911, so relatively modern text, explains the differences between the 2 herbs. Crotonus fructus Bado and Rhei Radix et Rhizoma Da Huang are both downward driving herbs, but Da Huang is cold in nature and appropriate for surplus heat in the yang organs, while Crotonus fructus Bordeaux is hot in nature and appropriate for surplus cold in the yin organs. Grand Materia Medica, the Ben Sao Gong Mu, written in 1590, states that the traditional view that Crotonus fructus Bordeaux and Da Huang mutually counteract. They say, used with Da Huang, its Bordeaux's draining action conversely moderates. This is because their natures are mutually counteracting. So they probably shouldn't be used together. So that's the comparison with those two herbs. Our next herb we are comparing is Natrii sulphus or Mong Xiao. Natrii sulphus Mong Xiao is salty and cold, while Da Huang is bitter and cold. Yet both drain accumulated heat in the treatment of clumped heat in the large intestine, which causes constipation. The two herbs are commonly used together for this purpose. However, Da Huang not only drains qi level heat from excess and yang brightness disorders, but also enters the blood level to cool the blood, resolve toxicity, and break up static accumulations. It is therefore used for nosebleeds and spitting up of blood due to blood heat, red, swollen, and painful eyes, and gynecological abdominal masses. The primary function of Natrii sulphus Mong Xiao is to clear the large intestine and soften areas of hardness in the treatment of constipation. That's our two comparisons. Let's talk about some combinations where we would use these herbs together. There's several of them, but we're going to discuss the three of them here. So again, that Mong Xiao, the Natrii sulphus that we just talked about comparing it with, is often combined with Da Huang. So this is very commonly used combination. Da Huang attacks, Natrii sulphus Mong Xiao softens and moistens. The combination thus works well to eliminate the obstruction within the intestines, draining the excess heat out with the stool. Once the old fetid material is expelled, the stomach and intestines are purified. When pathogenic heat is removed, the stomach and intestines can function smoothly. This is the reason that this combination is found in most of the formulas that purge heat accumulation. In biomedical terms, Da Huang stimulates peristalsis, while Natrii sulphus Mong Xiao as a salt increases the osmotic pressure within the bowel, increasing fluids in the intestines and thus leading to passage of watery stool. Natrii sulphus Mong Xiao and Da Huang can also be combined in the treatment of abscesses, swellings, and toxic sores as they clear fire and reduce swelling. Another combination is with Cinnamomum ramulus or guizhi. This is cinnamon twig, not cinnamon bark. It's not the spice, but cinnamon twig. This combination has a broad clinical application and is an excellent example of the subtleties involved in the strategy of combining hot and cold herbs. Due to the strong exterior releasing and channel warming actions of Cinnamomum ramulus guizhi and the purging and blood stasis reducing actions of Da Huang, this combination has a very intricate clinical action. Utilizing the exterior releasing effect of Cinnamomum ramulus guizhi with the draining of internal excess accumulation by Da Huang to treat a combined exterior and interior condition which presents with chills, headache, fever, and sweating, together with abdominal fullness and pain. This is called sweating and purging used together. Utilizing Da Huang to drain downward and the warmth of Cinnamomum ramulus guizhi to protect the spleen from the coldness of Da Huang. This is often the remedy for a situation in which purging has been used too soon in an externally contracted exterior disorder, causing the exterior pathogen to sink into the interior and obstruct the spleen, stomach, and intestines with such symptoms as abdominal fullness and pain with constipation. Utilizing the ability of Da Huang to enter the blood and remove stagnation, as well as its ability to cool the blood as the primary approach, and Cinnamomum ramulus guizhi to warm the blood and thereby encourage the restoration of normal blood flow after the stagnation has been removed. This is reflected in the formula peach pit decoction to order the qi, or Daohe Cheng Qi Tang, Cheng Qi Tang. So that's that combination. Let's talk about it with Rhei Radix or Shengdi Huang. Da Huang is bitter and cold. It unblocks heat clumped in the intestines and it directs and drives it downward. It also directs fire downward and cools the blood. Rhei Radix Shen Di Huang is sweet and cold, cools the blood, moistens, and clears heat. Together, their heat clearing and blood cooling actions are greatly enhanced, and the ability to stop bleeding is also increased. The pair is thus used for blazing fire in the heart and stomach, where qi and fire rise and carry the blood upward, causing nosebleed and spitting up of blood. Moreover, if fire from deficiency is also disturbing the interior, this combination may still be useful, provided the Rhei Radix Shen Di Huang is prescribed in a larger dosage than Da Huang. Important formulas worth 1,000 gold pieces are the Qianjin Yao Feng by Sun Simiao in the 7th century. Sun Simiao is one of the great physicians, Chinese physicians, in the 7th century CE. Has a formula for nosebleed and spitting up of blood due to deficiency from overwork, which calls for a cubic spoon, approximately 1 gram, of Da Huang powder and 15 grams of Rhei Radix Shen Di Huang juice taken on an empty stomach 3 times a day. Another area in which this combination would be helpful is parched dry stools with damaged yin. Rhei Radix Shen Di Huang enriches the yin, while Da Huang unblocks the clumped heat in the intestines. When the yin and fluids increase, the stool passes more easily. This is known as increasing the water to float the boat, like that. So those are our 3 combinations we're discussing today. Let's talk briefly about the contents of Da Huang. So according to Bensky and his team, the contents of this herb include many anthraquinones and anthraquinone glycosides, stilbene glycosides, naphthol glycosides, phenylbutanone glycosides, tannins, rutin, as well as volatile oils, organic acids, and sugars. Chen and Chen highlight senescide A, B, C, D, E, and F, imidin, alloimidin, crisophenol, rhein, physcion, rhine-8 monobeta-D glucoside, physcion monoglucoside, alloimidin 8 monoglucoside, imidin monoglucoside, chrysophenol and chrysophenol monoglucoside. So what's interesting is some of these will come up, like imidin comes up as a potential interaction with cytochrome P450 when we talk about drug-herb interactions, but it's not strong, so we don't have to worry about it. So actually it's not mentioned in drug-herb interactions, but that was a specific content that was mentioned when I looked them up. Let's talk about the science. So according to Chen and Chen, the pharmacological effects of Da Huang include senescide A, alloimidin, and rhein cause purgation. Hepatoprotective effects, cholagogic effects in dogs and cats. So a cholagogic means being a cholagogue or inducing the flow of bile. So it can induce the flow of bile in dogs and cats. Hemostatic in mice, broad spectrum antibiotic, cardiovascular benefits in animal studies, nephroprotective, so helps the kidneys, antipyretic, reduces fever, analgesic, helps pain, and anti-inflammatory. Clinical studies show it can help with renal impairment with other herbs with an N of 20, so not statistically valid. Gastrointestinal bleeding, N of 890, so that's a good size study. Acute pancreatitis, N equals 100. Enteritis, N equals 14, not statistically valid. Constipation in cerebral vascular accident patients with other herbs. So as soon as you start adding other herbs, I get a little concerned about having the other herbs doing some of the heavy lifting here. Dyslipidemia, N equals 47. Acute icteric hepatitis, so that is hepatitis or inflammation of the liver, causing jaundice. Icteric means jaundice, and that has N equals 80, so 80 subjects in it. 2 studies on tonsillitis, one with 22 subjects and one with 40 children. All of these showed it helped these conditions. All right, let's talk about drug-herb interactions. Chen and Chen say prolonged use of Da Huang may cause loss of potassium and increased cardiac glycoside toxicity, according to expert opinion. Da Huang may induce cytochrome 2E1 and inhibit 3A4, Again, these appeared to be in vitro studies. So again, low level of evidence for these. We don't know if it does this in humans. Da Huang may inhibit P glycoprotein in an in vitro study. Again, in vitro is lowest level of evidence, T level, because we don't know if it's going to do anything in humans. And the American Herbal Products Association Botanical Safety Handbook, I love this book. They say, puts this herb in interaction class A, herbs for which no clinically relevant interactions are expected. And I think these interactions I mentioned here are all pretty low level and are very much at that stage of does it really? So I'd be slightly cautious with this, but I'm not concerned about drug-herb interactions. But talking about concerns, there are lots of concerns about this herb. So Bensky and his team note several concerns with Da Huang. Under the heading of cautions and contraindications, they say because this herb readily injures the stomach qi, should not be used in those with a weak stomach. Similarly, it should be avoided by those with qi and blood deficiency who do not have significant accumulations or blood stasis. Used with great caution and only when absolutely necessary during menstruation, pregnancy, and lactation. Under the heading of traditional contraindications, they say, the classic states that excess should be drained. The nature of this herb is greatly bitter, greatly cold, and exceedingly facilitating. Its fierce and violent qi drives deep in to pound the enemy, letting nothing stop its progress. Thus, if blood level heat is not clumped and the 6 pulses are not deep and full, definitely do not lightly use it to wash away constipation. And this is from Harm and Benefit in the Materia Medica, the Ben Sao Hai Li by Huang, written in 1893. And you can see, our opening story was a pregnant lady died from using this, being prescribed this inappropriately. So this is an herb of some risk. Not so much risk that we shouldn't use it, but just we need to use it properly. So under the heading of toxicity, Bensky and his team say, overdosage can cause a toxic reaction, especially if the fresh herb is used. Symptoms include diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, abdominal colic, and jaundice. Long-term use of this herb may cause severe damage to the large intestine, cirrhosis of the liver, and substantial loss of electrolytes, hypokalemia. So hypokalemia means too little potassium in the blood. Potassium is very tightly regulated. Too much or too little can kill you. So that is not something that we want to have happen. Allergic reactions have also been reported, usually after large doses, 30 grams, and include flushing, pruritus or itching, popular rashes, and that says popular rashes, but it should say papular rashes, so raised rashes, asthma, and tachypnea, which means trouble breathing, or rapid breathing. Chen and Chen has several cautions and contraindications for this herb. Extremely bitter and cold, Da Huang may damage the spleen and stomach and should be used with caution. Possible side effects include nausea, vomiting, and poor appetite. Use of Da Huang is contraindicated in patients who do not have constipation or blood stagnation. Use Da Huang with caution in patients who are menstruating or in postpartum women without stasis. Da Huang is contraindicated in patients with qi and blood deficiencies and in pregnancy. Nursing mothers should take Da Huang with great caution as it may enter breast milk, causing diarrhea in the infant. Those two had warnings. So does Brandon Wiseman. Similarly has warnings. Da Huang is very bitter and very cold. It easily damages stomach qi, so it should be used with caution and weakness of the spleen and stomach. Because Da Huang is down-bearing and sinking and also quickens the blood, it is contraindicated in pregnancy, during menstruation, and during breastfeeding. It can cause the infant to have diarrhea. Individual responses to the precipitating effect of Da Huang vary, so it should be noted that the dosage required for freeing the stool varies from patient to patient. The American Herbal Products Association's Botanical Safety Handbook puts this herb in 3 safety classes, 2B, 2C, and 2D. The General Safety Class 2 states herbs for which the following use restrictions apply unless otherwise directed by an expert qualified in the use of the described substance. Safety Class 2B states not to be used during pregnancy. 2C states not to be used while nursing. 2D states other specific use restrictions as noted, and they say it is contraindicated in children under 12, menstruation, or for longer than 8 days of use. All right, and that is our day today. So today we did a deep dive into a very important, interesting Chinese herb, da huáng, Rhei Radix et Rhizoma, or rhubarb root, or rhizome. This herb is relatively commonly used herb for treating constipation and accumulations, as well as many blood disorders. But it can be harsh and cause some serious issues if used incorrectly. We spent a good amount of time discussing its intricacies, including preparations, cautions, and comparisons to other herbs. And with that, we conclude another exploration of a very useful Chinese herb. So here's my take home with this. This is an awesome herb. It is a powerful herb. It is a strong herb. It is really, when you are using it correctly, it is a really great herb. Where you get into trouble is when you're using it incorrectly. And there's a lot throughout history of Chinese herbology. There's excess purgation. There's this whole purgative school of thought with Chinese medicine. And this kind of leads that school. There's others, but this is a big one in that school of thought. And so it has been used inappropriately historically by people who don't understand what it does, just like our story, our legend that we talked about earlier. But it's a great herb, should be used when necessary, but always with a bit of caution, making sure you're using it appropriately. In our next episode, we will be looking at another Chinese herbal formula, Gancao, Ganjiang, Fuling, Baiju Tang, or licorice, ginger, poria, and white attracted lotus decoction. This is a formula that warms the spleen and overcomes dampness. As always, we will do our deep dive into this herb formula and look at its traditional uses and its preparation, interactions, and cautions. And as usual, we'll be adding something a little different. It's going to be another interesting expedition into the exciting universe of herbs. Please join us in 2 weeks. Thank you very much for joining us. If you like this podcast, please do us a huge favor. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app. That is great feedback to us, and we really appreciate it. Thank you for even considering it. And you can get this course as continuing education, get more info on all of my courses at integrativemedicinecouncil.org. And remember, you get 20% off by using the code SH20OFF at integrativemedicinecouncil.org. And you can always get in touch with me at drgreg@spurbsherbs.com or at our website, www.spurbsherbs.com. That's SPERBSHERBS.com. And as usual, we have our bibliography. Thank you very much.
Spurbs Herbs.
The proceeding was presented by Dr. Greg Sperber. We would like to thank Janelle for all her support and everybody else who contributed to this program.
Janelle.
Timothy Dobbins.
Rogers.
Campbell.